This podcast, The Good, the Bad and the Vagina, is brought to you by me, Tess Lively, a retired midwife, birth keeper, mother and sovereign woman. The views shared are my own and those of my guests. If something doesn't resonate, release it. It's not meant to upset or offend. If you feel discomfort, please seek support for your own healing. If you don't like what you hear, don't listen, don't look. This space honours truth, freedom and expression, protected under the rights to free speech. Welcome to The Good, the Bad and the Vagina. Let's get started. Hello and welcome, Victoria Rickson. Oh my God, it is such an honour and a pleasure to have you here. So obviously it's the good, the bad and the vagina. And as you know, we've been on quite a journey together since meeting each other, and some of that's going to come out, I'm sure, tonight. I obviously left the NHS last year. I then set up my business, and I've been a virgin in business, but an expert in vaginas, as we know. I can't keep saying I'm a virgin at business now because I think I feel like I'm at the final trimester of my pregnancy and I'm about to give birth. But I am a virgin at podcasts. And I will remain an expert in vaginas.
Love it.
So what I want to say is I did my very first session on the 15th of October, which was my birthday, which was the one that I launched today. And you are my very, very first guest. So this is the conception of my virginal podcast. So very welcome, Vic. I'm really happy to have you here.
I am honoured to be here.
So I know you've done quite a lot of podcasts, variant things. I've watched them all, seen them all, and I think you're fabulous, the way you present yourself and things. But if you could just give me a little intro as to who you are as a woman, a sovereign woman, a mother, a midwife, and an activist, and all those beautiful other things that you so wonderfully and warrior woman achieve.
Oh, that entrance. What can I say? I'm Victoria. As you know, I like to be called Vic, not Vicky. I'm a mum to 4 beautiful boys, which you've met. I think you've met all of my boys. The older one is not living at home, so not everybody gets to meet him. I'm wife to Reese, and I was a midwife for 6.5 years in the NHS, and I've birthed my babies over 18 years. And I birthed one in Dundee, one in Portsmouth, one at home, and one in Plymouth Hospital. And I had an 18-year gap, and I've had 4 different births. I had a ventouse, then a normal delivery. Well, I hate saying normal because someone's normal might be a section, but you know what I mean? In our language, a vaginal birth. Then I've had a home vaginal birth, and then I had an induction vaginal birth. So I've kind of walked the system not only as a woman, but as a mother and a midwife. And I finally left after the NHS being the worst employment I've ever had as a mature woman going into it, because I didn't go into midwifery until I was in my late 30s. And it was the most horrific employer I've ever worked for. And I really struggled. I lost a lot of who I was during that time. And then when I finally left, it was almost like a pack this shit up day. I am done. Like, I'm a true Virgo. Once I make my mind up, I never go back on it. I'm done. Like, that's it. I'm out. And since then, it's been a roller coaster, as you know. But I was saying today to someone, I feel so lost, but so found. I feel so aware, but so unaware. And I feel like I'm over here, but I'm over here. It is like you are going through, a lot of us are going through a bit of a dimensional ascension change in our lives and in our astrology, and it's crazy. But you and I walked a pretty parallel grievance process together. I think, I was triggered at points and you and I didn't speak for a little while, and then we came back together and worked through our stuff. And now it's like we get each other, we support each other. We might not always agree with everything, but it's still love and support. And that's all that matters that I've learned through this journey.
Yeah, it has been quite an incredible journey. Like, your own personal journey reflects and resonates with such a lot of my own, because I've had the same. I've had 5, but over a vast period of time, a whole 5 different births, like you, home, hospital, and I I hear and resonate so much with your story. So one of the things that I want to kind of talk about is because I walked the journey like you. I did birth as a woman and then birth as a midwife. I firmly believe that everybody assumes that when you're a midwife, you know everything, but when you're pregnant, your brain goes to mush. There is nothing in the world that resonates in the same way in a
No.
non-pregnant state. So I was just kind of wanting to hear your sort of thoughts and processes on those separate aspects of birthing and how you felt, what it was like with your eldest in comparison to possibly what it was like with your most recent one, Henry, because he's what, 5?
5, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Cameron was born in 2001 and I was 19. So I was this like, I know everything. I know the world. No one can tell me. I know what I'm doing. Mother, don't tell me what to do. But actually, I became at times the worst version of myself and the best. Because if I hadn't gone through the worst bits, it wouldn't have propelled me on to where I am today. But having Cameron was like the best thing that ever happened to me. So when I look back then, I just remember it being really non-stressful. It wasn't stressful being pregnant. It was light. It was, I look back in my memory and it's really fond and it's, um, I had sickness and yes, I had stretch marks and yes, I grew, but you didn't take photos of your bump like people do now and you didn't document it. It was just something that went privately and inwardly, I felt, if I look back. I actually felt like we would talk more and breastfeeding was more normalized and you didn't feel ashamed about any choices you made. It was just really different. And then when I went on to have William, he was 2008 and in that pregnancy I had a bit of gestational diabetes towards the end, and not that I remembered that until I found his stuff, because you don't even remember your pregnancies in that way. You're out of body. It's like a beautiful silver blanket goes over you and you're like untouchable and your skin looks radiant and your hair looks radiant and you just radiate this huge energy of like, yeah, I'm pregnant, and it's amazing. So that when I was going through some documents in the attic recently, I found his birth register and it said on there gestational diabetes, and I thought, did I have gestational diabetes? That was weird. I don't remember that. And then I went into labour with him naturally at home, and because I've laboured naturally with all of my children, never really past their due dates at all, maybe like one day. And now obviously Henry was 36 and 6, so that was quite early. And I was anxious because it was the anticipation of waiting for what was coming rather than my body saying, well, this is the normal part and you're going to cope with it, because Will's birth, I just went in and I just birthed and had a baby, and it was so overwhelming because I was so aware and I was like, oh my God, what is this transition? And then I had him and went home a few hours later. And then when I had James, I don't know where it came from. I can't even tell you. I just knew I had to birth at home. I just knew. And I never even questioned it. I went, no, I'm having a home birth. Now, no one ever promoted that to me. And I don't know anyone that had had a home birth, because I'm not really close to like my nan, who wouldn't talk about her birth type thing. Like, we got quite a disjointed family in that way. So it wasn't like my nan would ever talk about her births. I wouldn't know how many of her births she'd had in a hospital. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and my mum didn't have home births. So I'm like, where did that come from? It was just a feeling in me. And Andy did not want a home birth. And he was like, oh my God, my mother-in-law was like, oh God, Vic, it's really dangerous. And she was a bit anxious, but I just felt the knowing was right. And so I laboured at home, was 3 centimetres for ages, and then I just went into lovely labour and I gave birth to him. And as you know, that birth was so spiritually amazing, like astral projection, I swear to God, out of body. The most powerful thing I've ever done in my life. I can still recall it now. I could
I can
literally
feel it.
sketch everything.
Yeah, I can
And
feel
then,
it.
yeah, and then I had Henry at 37. And I was type 1 diabetic, as you know, and that was really, I mean, we can talk about that a little bit more later if you want, but that pregnancy absolutely destroyed me. And it's, in a way, I've ended my births on that, and that sometimes annoys me.
Okay.
So sometimes I want to almost go back and not feel robbed of the beautiful births I've had and redo that birth. But I feel that that's something that I revisit often and go, I got robbed of what I would have done. Sometimes that really bugs me.
Mm. You was a midwife when you were
Yeah.
birthing
I wasn't
Hemi,
a
weren't you?
midwife before with the 3, it was the last.
No, and it was. Do you think that subconsciously your knowledge and experience of being a midwife held a small amount of fear that you kind of brought into that birth arena, not just the birth, but possibly potentially the whole pregnancy?
Tess, if I told you this, when I became a midwife, I was all about normal, right? I didn't know high risk because I'd never seen it. So for me to go into midwifery, how many home births do you think I opted to go to in my whole career? 2, because I was so scared about normal birth.
Wow.
So I was the kind of person that wanted the preterms, the women with the heart conditions, the twins. I never wanted to go near the pool. One, I couldn't be asked dealing with the temperature. That's the truth. 2, I felt useless because I'd lost such control. Not control, but I had to be in control because of the litigation, because of the fear.
Mm.
To sit in space with women and do nothing is the hardest thing to do when you're an NHS midwife. People underestimate that.
Yeah, I think it is now. I think what we're training is obstetric nursing. I don't think it's midwifery at all. I mean, I was fortunate when I started my career. It was like a long time ago, and I had a lot of experience with less intervention, less poking around. I can remember going to a home birth. My very, very first home birth that I ever did, Vic. I went to visit a woman on my way home. I was on call that night. It was my first ever on call. And I went to visit her. She asked for a stretch and sweep because she was like 10 plus 12, it was then. And I spent like an hour and a half getting to know her, chatting away, having a normal conversation, just like you and I are now. And we went upstairs and I examined her, and she was fully delighted, absolutely. Like, and I was like examining her, thinking, "Have I got this wrong? Is this true?" And then when I kind of said to her, "You're fully dilated. Like, have you not had any pain or anything?" She went, "No, not at all." And
Wow.
then I rang my colleague to say, "I'm here. I need the on-call equipment." And then the woman just opened up the fridge, and as she opened up the fridge, her waters went, and she just looked at me, and I grabbed a tea towel and literally caught this in the tea towel. And I was like, "Oh my God, this home birth stuff is so easy."
You see my character at that time was feeling really out of control. I felt really bullied. I felt really nervous. So I was reflecting the practice that I needed to fulfill that void and fill
Yeah.
that nerve. So when I got given a woman who was in the pool and I could do nothing, I was almost like, I wonder if she's going to have raised blood pressure so I can get her out. I wonder if she's going to bleed so she'll have to get out. And I'd be sat there looking around at the equipment going, do I remember how to work that hoist? Where's the call bell? I cannot believe the change in me as a woman and a mother because it was stripped, but I've realized they didn't do that to me. I chose to become that person because I hadn't dealt with some of the things or hadn't addressed some internal issues of my own life, and I'd gone through a divorce in that time with Andrew and lots of different things, and I think what I was reflecting was actually just who I was, and the practice in itself was just material. When actually strip back everything, women do not change in birth. It is what we create around it. Yes, we have to mitigate harm, but actually sometimes I think to myself, what about these women that labor all day at home at 2 centimeters? No one ever listens in, ever. Their uterus is still contracting, potentially 2 in 10, but they're 2 centimeters. So why do we all of a sudden start listening in at 4 centimeters? But if she's been at home all day at 2 centimeters, comes in it fully and has a baby, we've never listened in. That baby was fine. You know what I mean? So there's so much around midwifery that I was projecting into that career, but actually the environment isn't for birth. That's
Certainly isn't. I mean, as we know, the same hormones that you need to have a baby is the same hormones and environment that you need to make love.
yes.
And if we were to put a couple into a room on delivery suite and then go knock on their door every 15 minutes, going, "Have you had an orgasm yet?"
Wouldn't happen.
It wouldn't happen, but effectively, that's what the space is, what we're creating in hospital for women having babies now. Listening to your story of when you qualified to the story of when I qualified, I have felt a difference in the last sort of 8 to 10 years in the whole landscape of how maternity is placed. And that you would have been coming through the doors at that change. And so your training would have had an additional dollop of fear put into it that may have triggered some of your childhood fears. I get what you're saying about how you were projecting it, but actually you were in a toxic environment that was generating fear to get you to comply so that they could get the woman to comply. So if they fear you enough as a staff member, then you are going to impact that onto that woman. And that's kind of why you were left feeling and being in the place that you were. I think for me, having had a lot more experience where I was totally independent or working in the community or just in that place of trust that I had a big chunk of my career where that was supported, encouraged, and nurtured. So when I was in the scenario of being in a delivery suite and people would be knocking on my door going, "Have you examined it yet?" Who needs to know that piece of information? Because she's quite happy. You need to know it. Well, I'll let you know when she wants to know, you know. But along with that, as you know, comes a whole big beating stick of, "You're not complying, Tess."
I've reflected on this a lot. There was a midwife when I qualified who was a home birth midwife, but she'd been a midwife for 25 years. She was a great midwife. But to me, who had trained in more of that, like you say, obstetric nursing type role, to me, what she was doing, where she wasn't doing what I was doing, I would look at her and go, she's unsafe. And that's what they're breeding. They're breeding out the decades of experience and replacing it with people that will go, she's really unsafe because she's not doing X, Y, and Z. So she might not necessarily document urine output every half an hour or FH every 15 minutes because she's old school. And actually, that's something I've really reflected on and thought, Vic, those people had it right. They were embedded in true midwifery practice that went back. I'm not talking 10 years, Tess. I'm talking 15, 20 years of career where they had embedded practice, from early 90s, mid 90s, when you didn't have all of this extra stuff. And CTG monitoring was of a place where, it was used differently and it was interpreted differently. And that I just, when I look at it now, I feel that I didn't train to be a midwife. That's the truth of it. I didn't train to be a midwife. I might have a certificate of that, but it's not what midwifery represents to me and I think people who watch me now will be like, "Oh, she's really obliterating our career," but it's true. It is true. Now I'm out of it and I reflect, I think, what on earth was I doing? Those policies aren't law. Law is do not harm another person. And I don't care what anybody says, vaginal examinations can be damn barbaric.
Well, you know my understanding about guidelines and policies. I've been loggerheads with organisations throughout my career, more so in the last 8 years, where people would talk about policies all the time. I can remember once a woman having a psychosis, and I wanted to readmit her to delivery suite for her safety. And I rang and tried to organise it, and I was blocked by the coordinator, who then put me in touch with the community matron. And she said, "Can I read the policy to you?" And I went, "No. First of all, it's inappropriate because I'm here with the woman. And secondly, it's not a policy, it's a guideline. And I'm saying to you, as an experienced midwife, this woman needs to be in a place of safety, which is on delivery suite." And they wouldn't accept her. And she then had a delay in her care. And the difference between policies and guidelines, midwives now are trained to use the word policy instead of guideline. A guideline is a guideline, a policy in HR. It's the only place you should ever see a hot policy.
Actually, when you start looking at some evidence, well, now I question who funded the evidence, who
Yeah.
wrote the evidence, where did that come from? Because I think sometimes when you look at a woman and you go, right, 4-hourly vaginal examinations, everybody's different and not everybody needs it. So I've really reflected massively on a couple of things being a midwife. How many times I've examined someone that I didn't need to. and cause them distress. I can remember an African lady coming in, very little English, into triage, and she point blank refused a vaginal examination. She was a first time mum, and I got her gas and air, and I tried to, because my boss was like, you really need to get her to have a vaginal examination. I'm like, I don't have to get her to do anything. But then I felt like I'm not competent because now I can't get someone to have a VE. And when I look back at it, I think, oh my God. And she was clamping her legs together. And I was just, I couldn't talk to her because the interpreter, she wasn't putting the phone to her ear. How inappropriate. And I just look back and I think, what on earth was I doing? And I know that people say, but you didn't know. That doesn't mean to say I don't have to go back and go, Vic.
And recognizing that and honoring it and questioning the ethics behind all of that has shown real growth on you as a human being. Do you know what I mean? It makes me then question the toxic relationship within this organisation, because you have people in a step above you, a Labour coordinator, saying to you, I need to know, you need to examine that woman. Inside, you've got this inner conflict going on.
She was in labour.
Yeah.
There was no doubt about it. We just didn't know her dilatation. Well, at some point, she's going to have a baby.
Well, you're going to know when she's fully, because you're going to see the head. That's what I used to say.
C to G was normal and she was contracting well. At that point, you think, so you are right. There is so much to unpick and unravel when you leave midwifery.
Yeah. But what I would say is that actually the coordinator let you down, because the coordinator didn't say, if she doesn't want an examination, then that's okay. We'll work with what we've got. So when you are disempowered as a staff member, as a midwife, as a person, and you're disempowered by the people above you, you're then passing that disempowerment onto the women, unless they can stand in their own power and hold their own sovereignty in that moment. It was interesting recently. I've been working with a woman, and she was a second-time mum. She was feeding her second baby, and she kept saying, something doesn't feel right, something doesn't feel right. And she was saying that to her midwife, who was a relatively newly qualified midwife, who then said, I'll refer you to this feeding specialist. I don't think she's got an obvious tongue tie, but I'll refer you. She went back into the office to do the referral, and her manager intercepted and stopped her doing that referral, saying that if it's not an obvious tongue tie, then she doesn't need to go to the tongue tie. So then this woman leaves the maternity services, gets her day 5 and a discharge telephone call, basic minimum stuff. And then it's only because she's having a mental health wobble, she's got the perinatal mental health team in, that somebody listens to her and refers her to the feeding specialist, and she gets the support that she needs. But that's 7 weeks delay in care.
Who has the right to deny anyone any care? It's not your money. Like, these people don't have the right. And I'd like to say that a lot of my colleagues weren't really like that. I don't remember seeing people be that obstructive. What I found out after is the sinister behaviour that I didn't see there. But I think for women, they have nowhere to go. They have nowhere. They've depleted our knowledge. We've allowed it. They've depleted our community. We've allowed it. And now they've withdrawn and retreated the care to the hospital. People don't want to go there. There's nothing. Well, I guess belief.
It is. And it's difficult because when a woman speaks and says, this doesn't feel right, if the person who she's speaking to is somebody who she's put her trust into, and then that person believes her initially, but then has to withdraw that care, it then makes me then realise the layers of toxicity are very much higher, and the midwives at the front are trying to do what they feel, like you, trying to do what you felt was the right thing. But if the person then with the slightly more power is the word, but it's not really the right word, comes in and then says, you've got to go and examine them, and you kind of go, oh, I don't know if I can.
What would happen is you step aside and then someone else becomes a bit more forceful or pushy and does what they've got to do to get the answer. But actually, why do this is what I don't understand. If you've got a multip, second time, third time, subsequent mum walking off the street and she's clearly labouring in labour, she's clearly there. Why have you got to lie her on the bed and do a VE? I don't get it. There's no evidence. The vaginal examination thing is the one thing I wish I'd questioned, because when I was pregnant with Henry and I went back through my notes, and I think in total I had 9 vaginal examinations in 24 hours. And I was screaming. Like, Reese remembers me screaming. That's like, when I sit here now and my vagina's right there, I'm like, that's not too far away from me. But when you're in that room, it feels like it's right at the, you're so disempowered from yourself, you actually like give it away and it's all the way down the end of the bed. It's just the strangest concept.
But do you not feel that that's because we're walking into this environment that's already laid down the rules and the law, that they're in control, because the very fact that they're saying the guidance says, the research says, this is our power tool, we're going to coerce you. I was thinking of saying to the next person that I meet that if they try to coerce a woman into care, then that woman needs to take out a safeguarding on that person. So if it's a doctor, they're supposed to have signed the Hippocratic Oath, which says, above all, I'll do no harm. If they're employed by the trust, they're supposed to adhere to the trust's guidance that says that they would treat women with respect, their patient with respect, and honour their courses and pathways. Well, if they're not following the contracts that they've signed things. The woman hasn't actually signed a contract, and she goes in and she's saying, I don't want that element of care, and they keep sending in people to try and coerce her. Well, for me, that's a safeguarding issue.
Absolutely.
Because if I was in a relationship with a husband who was coercing me into doing things that I didn't want, they would have the social services all over me.
Interesting. I go from having a home birth to literally handing all of me over in my next pregnancy, trusting, acknowledging. But actually, when I look back, I had to have EMDR treatment after my pregnancy, which I never heard of, because I was trapped in that moment where they diagnosed me with type 1 diabetes, because I laughed and said they got it wrong and that must have been somebody else's results. I was so traumatized. And I think it wasn't just what they were diagnosing, it was the environment. I walked into this room. I can still remember the day. I walked into clinic, and when I walked in there, not only was there one of the midwives, diabetes midwife, who I really like, she was absolutely lush. There was a student nurse. There were like 3 doctors. Then there was the consultant. Then there was another endocrinologist. And then there was another SHO. And then there was 2 people here. And no one consented for. I'm a midwife. This is my privacy. I never quite understood why I allowed it all, because you know me, I don't allow stuff like that in my everyday life. But I really didn't know how easy it was for them to almost rob my voice and rob me of my belief system, because when you're pregnant, you do anything for your baby to be well, but there's also an element of your brain which is really powerful but also really vulnerable. The vulnerability is the bit I never quite understood until I was pregnant with Henry. Whereas before I was empowered in my vulnerability, but I felt so low and lost with the vulnerability in this pregnancy. And I don't think it matters whether you have a partner around you or not. It's your journey in itself. And, when they're all looking at me saying I've got diabetes, and they're touching my fingernails and they're looking at my body, and you're not the normal type of diabetic. And then I was Googling, what does a normal diabetic look like? But I can remember leaving the hospital, and I still to this day do not know who I rang on the way out. And it wasn't my husband, because he was at work. I rang someone and I was hysterical, because all I took away was stillbirth.
I know. It's because when you're pregnant, all of your senses are heightened, like your sense of taste, your sense of smell, your emotional state. You see the world through a different set of goggles. So that fear that you feel is completely heightened. So when they're talking to you and saying you've got diabetes and there's loads of things that we can do, but there is a risk of stillbirth, of course that's what you're going to take away, because that's the biggest, loudest fear. And we all hear fear great. It's a protective factor. We know that from our little brain back here. It is a little bit of a protective factor, but because it's an intellectualized protective factor now, it just sends us into a total flat spin. I mean, if they'd have said to you, Vic, this is the situation. You've got type 1 diabetes and you're at risk of a stillbirth, but if we chop your left leg off, it'll go. You go chop my left leg off, because that's your baby. That's your baby, and that's what you will do for your baby. Do you know what I mean? And
Because your clinic appointment is only 15 minutes, they rammed all of that into 15 minutes, robbed me of my home birth because I was due around Christmas Eve time, robbed me of what I envisaged my birth to be again. I held on to that beautiful moment with James when I gave birth to James, and then I think, oh my God, I'm going to have that again with Henry. So walking into a clinic where I'm thinking, don't really understand what's wrong, and it's only gestational diabetes. I've had it before, not that I knew that at the time, but you hear it before. It changed my awareness as a midwife that whenever somebody got diagnosed with diabetes, I was like, oh my God, are you okay? Rather than, oh, okay, you're under the consultant. It changed everything about my care pathway because I'd walked it. And I could never quite understand when people would be really, really, really anxious about being diabetic. But like, oh, I'll go away after pregnancy. Well, it's a horrendous disease to live with. Absolutely horrendous. So I think being a midwife and seeing the harm created a fear. I never realized how a shoulder dystocia, I'd never seen that or heard of it until I became a midwife because I'd never been around it. I wasn't a birth keeper before. I just became a midwife after I had my beautiful birth, wanted to give women that. Well, now I realize I was never really meant to be a midwife. I was meant to be the gobby whistleblower. And, that's clearly, well, that's my point, maybe that's all I was bloody worth. But it was really tough, like having that shift, and it's taken me a long time to unpick that birth. And obviously, I've had a miscarriage recently, and I still have that womb wound. I am still bleeding from that, and I definitely have a wound there. An old energy. It feels like I'm not ready to give up not being pregnant ever again. I think I'm 43, and I think, oh, it's over. And actually, I'm holding on to a little bit of like, I so wasn't ready for that. I so didn't expect that.
I was 45 when I had Rio, so it's not impossible. And I'd had a miscarriage, and it was 2 years after my miscarriage that I then fell pregnant with Rio. So, never say never until the fat lady sings, as they say.
I think Reese will have an absolute heart attack if he hears that. But I just feel a little bit like I'm understanding myself as a woman. I'm a lot more in tune with myself as a woman. I'm not just taking away what everybody else is going through, but I've had a lot to deal with in the last 19 months, like an awful, awful, awful lot to deal with. And I think that would break anybody. And that could cause a miscarriage for anybody because of that intense stress. Your body will reject what it can't hold on to if it's trying to keep you alive and well. And Tess, behind these podcasts, I have sometimes the darkest days. It's tough, you know?
So, obviously, we've spoken about the good, some of the really good things like your home birth. And is there anything about the last 18 months that you do want to sort of open up and talk about? I'm happy if you don't. I'm happy if you want to move on to other subjects. We've mirrored a journey in the fact that we both took out grievances and employment tribunals, but that's really how our journey started together. As you know, you met me, I was 8 stone, I was a shell of myself, I was a broken being, treading water, holding myself together.
Apologizing profusely.
For breathing.
Yeah.
And, I reflected on all of that, saying it was quite reflective of a toxic relationship. That's how it resonated with me, experiencing that sort of thing. And I think you understood and got that. I think you kind of sort of realised that. But you left before me. Your leaving was very much, I'm done. I'm out of here. I'm not doing this anymore. Like an incident happened and that was it. You just knew. For me, it took a lot more drawn out. I think because of my previous experience of hanging on to being a midwife, because it was such an important aspect to me. Once an interim midwife said to me, "Don't let midwifery define you, Tess." Okay, and it was a sentence that stuck with me and resonated over and over and over and over. It's only since I've left the NHS that I wholeheartedly get now what she means, because it was defining me. I felt like I couldn't be anything if I didn't have this midwifery label or this pin, but actually that's just the control. Whereas for you, it was like, there's my pin, shove it where the sun doesn't shine.
I think when I left, it was an accumulation. It was like a volcano erupted. But actually, for a long time behind that, and not many people know this, I was planning to move to Orkney and do a stint in Orkney as an Orkney midwife. I was in communication with Orkney to go and live there for maybe a year and do midwifery on the island. So I had already had that in my mind. And I think a bit like someone else we know hanging on to midwifery to go and move somewhere else and do their own midwifery is kind of what a lot of people do. I couldn't hang on anymore. I couldn't grasp the hanging on for the sake of me having panic attacks in the car park at work. I'd never had a panic attack in my life. And I was like, I think you remember it. I just couldn't breathe. I just couldn't breathe. And I can remember getting out of my car and walking from the car park to the building. And it was like Alice in Wonderland. I was shrinking by the time I got to the door. Nobody in my life has ever made me feel like that, or any job. And I had to keep saying, what am I hanging on for? And it was my ego. It was my ego the whole time. And I just wasn't prepared to look shame and say, it's not a shame. Leaving is not shameful, and stepping in front of that shame and leaving the shame behind. But it was that moment with Rebecca and Tilly and what they went through and seeing the harm that she suffered that absolutely broke my heart. Broke my heart seeing her. I still, again today, remember who was in the room. I just stopped. I wasn't on autopilot that day. I didn't go into autopilot. Something made me slow and take it all in. It was almost like I can see everybody like walking around. I can remember looking at my boss's face, like I was camera shotting that moment. And then, when I left, I never came off the register when I left. I had no intention of coming off the register. Yes, I didn't like the NMC and the way they behaved, but I was already campaigning for maternity safety at that point. I was already in the middle of the With Women movement, which I founded, by the way.
It was amazing.
And I've actually just posted in there today. Something told me to post in there today, so I've just done that. And I've actually just put up the With Women movement logo on my ex. So something's brewing there emotionally. But when I actually think about when I came off the register and I look back over an email that I sent to the NMC on the 24th of April last year, that was a knee jerk because of the stress of the baby killer and what if they're trying to set me up like Lucy Letby. It was all really, really horrible. It was I was very naive when I started that movement. One, naive that I trusted people I didn't know. That's taught me a huge lesson. I acted inappropriately in private group messages about other people and shouldn't have done that. If I want to do that, I should do that publicly and say, I think you're a moron, which actually, I would do. But when you're in a group and you trust people, a bit like my school mums, we might have a little bit of a moan about the teacher, or, we might moan about somebody else. Oh, have you heard about this? But we've been friends for 15 years and I would never expect them to screenshot it and show people. But what I learned from that journey was that actually these two other women screenshotted that and shared that with other people. And I've learned a huge lesson from all of that. So other than those little things, I never imagined that I would come off the register and not to actually practice as a midwife. And I think that's why when you and I went to that lawyer, we won't name that lawyer, but when we went to see him and he said to me, you will never, ever clear your name until you clear your name with this. And I found that so upsetting, as you remember, I was quite tearful. You were tearful as well. It was absolutely awful that there was no justice for us at that moment. But what was more difficult was trying to find trying to find my rational brain about how I start challenging bereaved parents. I just couldn't get over. I couldn't get over that, could I? I really struggled.
I think you still do, Vic.
Yeah, I find it really uncomfortable, and I'm like, this doesn't feel right. And I think by the time I had that time out from July to sort of Christmas, January, I'd gained a lot more perspective, and I think I was in the middle of the grieving, but I had a bit more perspective of, well, if you let this go, another midwife has to endure this. And that wasn't, I don't feel now I'm just campaigning for women and babies. I am actually campaigning and I'm a huge advocate for the protection of midwives. That literally gets right in me. And I go, no, we bloody strip our lives back for you. We give up Christmases and birthdays and sports days and, working through our periods and working through menopause and working through heavily pregnant. We give up an awful lot for that career. So when it gets stripped from me and then they start doing it to someone else, I'm like a lion. And I don't like it. I don't like the injustice of it. And I tell you now, Tess, I will never give up that fight for that. But you cannot change the monster. That's something I've learned. It has to come from us in our groups and villages. But what, I was speaking to Lara today, and I'm sure she won't mind me saying, but we were just saying there's no connection to midwives out here that have all done what we've done. We're all segregated and we don't all quite come together because actually we've lost that much trust in what they've done to us in our employment. It's actually very hard to trust a midwife out there other than the one you know.
Oh, tell me. I mean, it's that story again, isn't it, about what you said earlier, when you had an experienced midwife and you looked at her practice and you thought she was dangerous. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing, isn't it? It's like, and it's she would be looking at you thinking whatever she thinks, she's got a lot to
Yeah.
learn.
And remember, on paper, if a parent lost a baby or was harmed, if the guideline was there and that midwife didn't do that, she's branded as dangerous. Well, actually, she's probably causing you less intervention versus that policy would probably cause you more harm. That's what's missing. And I think the real disparity in the information out there is that women and families that have had harm done to them, they look at what the hospitals supply to them, and the midwives have no clue what's being said about them out there to families. Because I've just walked that walk, and you know that. You think, what the hell is this? And that is where it's really, really dangerous. And I think somebody asked me the other day, what's the one bit of advice you would do differently? And I said, I wish we were encouraged to attend coroners so we can actually see the outcome of a case. We follow the case, which we're entitled to do. Under GDPR, you can't ask certain things. And if you ever write a coroner's statement, you find out where that coroner's statement ends up. Does it even get to court? You get no updates, and actually take legal advice, get a lawyer, not a union representative, to help you write your coroner's statement. Because what you don't realize is that is a sworn document, and what you're writing is not really potentially conducive to that case. So as a registrant, you have the right to an opinion. So you have the right to give your opinion on that case. But in our situations in our jobs, you are only allowed to write what you saw in that moment. But even though you heard something after, you couldn't put it in. So there's a lot that I understand from the parents' perspectives now, having walked what I've walked. And I think if I could have done everything again, I would have been more curious about the intricacies of what goes on behind the scenes. But obviously, we know care is blocked. This midwife does this. A bit like pregnancy is from, fertilization, conception, right until the baby's one. If we all had a midwife from that, not at conception, of course, but if we had a midwife from then to then, you would know your woman inside out and her family, right? But what do? We don't even get to see women at conception. The fertility team or the early pregnancy unit, and then you don't know what happens with them until you get a bit of paper with a sticker on and a barcode that says miscarriage 10+3. What do? Put it in your tray, and then you feel really sad actually when you look back and I go, how many women did I print off and put in the goddamn tray and never once asked them how they were?
So I would ring my women up if they had a miscarriage and just kind of say, look, I know it's a difficult time. I'm touching base. I'm here if you need me. But that has been stripped out. You know now how many weeks pregnant you are before the first time you see your midwife. 16 weeks. So you get a telephone call booking. I believe that we need to be doing home bookings, that we need to go into the woman's home
Absolutely.
so that she holds the power of that journey right from the offset.
Yeah, but do you know what I worry about with that? There are too many judgy midwives with the safeguard, and they go, our house was a mess, she had a dangerous dog. So there'll be way more referrals, way more malicious stuff going on.
So those referrals happen, but they then happen afterwards when they go and do the first day home visit. And actually, if there is an issue there, it's left right till the last minute before it's found out. And those issues are very rare and few and far between. But what it does do right at the very beginning, like I used to do home bookings, and I would go in, and if I felt a woman was struggling in a situation or needed additional support and help, whether that be financial or whatever, I was in a great position where I could say, we've got this stuff for you. We can help you now. We can put this all in place long before your baby arrives. If I felt that she didn't really have any huge amount of knowledge or experience in and around babies, because I would have normal conversations with her and I would find this out. I could say, there's a group, there's a massage group, a baby massage group. Go along when you're pregnant, go and meet new mums, get yourself out there and integrate yourself and be enthusiastic about all of that. That village stuff is the safety net. But and isolating women means that that big monster that you keep talking about is able to suck that power out of them. So, like you, even though you were a midwife, you walked into that appointment and within seconds, poof, your power was gone. You were no longer Victoria Vixen, who was 30 whatever weeks pregnant when you found out. You were now type 1 gestational diabetes. And that's what everybody saw when you walked into that room. And actually, even as a type 1 diabetic, if you chose to have a home birth, that's still your choice. The guidelines might not support that. The midwives might be jumping up and down about that. If a woman is empowered enough and educated enough to be able to have that facilitated and supported, what are our parameters about where your blood sugars go if you can't maintain them? You know, what about this? What about that? If inducing women, there's a whole load of information in and around that that's totally distorted. Back to the thing about evidence and guidelines and all of those things. We can get a piece of evidence to prove whatever we want. Whatever we want to support our narrative, we can find that evidence to back it up. And all it means is that in that system that's there, they pick and choose the evidence that supports their narrative, which means if we put a woman on a pathway here, if she stays normal, we'll check her out at that end. If she doesn't and she deviates, even if she's got an ingrowing toenail, because it seems to be for the smallest of things now, we can jolly her along on this pathway and then we have even more control. We laugh about it and we are making a bit light of it, but it is so true. I mean, I have known women to be induced for the most obscure reasons. Now, if a woman wants
Now,
to be
guess what I got induced for?
well, it wasn't because you were Victoria Vixen, because by that time you'd lost that name.
What do you think I got induced for? What is on my notes for why I was induced?
So I would imagine that they decided that your blood sugars were slightly unstable because you weren't regularly hitting a 7. You might have had the odd 8, 9 or 10 in there.
Did not get induced for type 1 diabetes. I got induced for anxiety.
Okay.
So when you look at the notes, you're like, you assholes.
So basically, they blamed you for the induction, even
Yes.
though that they suggested or recommended, because the guidelines.
They went the whole way through my pregnancy. Your query type 1, then you were type 1, then it was type 2, then it was gestational diabetes. Then they said that I would have to be induced at 37 weeks as a type 1. Then they said you're going to have to be induced at 38 weeks as a type 2. And then because I then changed to a gestational diabetic on insulin, they put it as 39 weeks. But because I had horrendous anxiety through my pregnancy about stillbirth, I was literally crawling to 37 weeks with a live baby. It was horrific, Tess, when I look back. So when I got there at 35 and 5, my consultant went, no, you're going to 39 weeks. And I had a fucking breakdown. I thought he's going to die. I'm never going to get to 39 weeks. So they induced me for mental health. That's awful. When I actually think about that, I think, you bitch, you nasty bitch. Like, you're just a bitch. You are not for women. And you've never had your own kids. You know, it sounds awful. It sounds absolutely awful to think that. But you don't know what it's like when you've not had a baby. It's a bit like saying you don't know what it's like unless you're a doctor. I get it. I've never been a doctor, but I have been an NHS midwife and I've had 4 births. That was the worst experience of my life.
Do you know what really upsets me about hearing that is that all of that stuff, your PTSD that you got from that very first appointment where they said your baby will die of a stillbirth, if you don't surrender all your control over to us. So then you surrender over your control over to them, and then they confuse you even more by not really knowing what they're doing. And then they fucked with your head so much, because basically that's what happened. They fucked with your head so much. They could then induce you for mental health, which means if anything went wrong, it's your own fault.
Exactly it. And then I ended up with 9 vaginal examinations. My vagina was red raw. I then understood how bad the ProPes was, because my labias were so inflamed, because the people don't explain to you that the prostaglandin on the ProPes will seep, when it's defrosting, will seep down with the vaginal moistness through the string, through the labia, out of the vagina, and it inflames your whole area. It's nasty. And then when you've got a colleague sticking their fingers up your bloody vagina, I had one the night before for a stretch and sweep at 36 and 6, 37 in the morning. I had one for the ProPes. You know, I could deal with that. The next one I had one was at 7:30 p.m. or 9:30 p.m. And I think it might have gone into my cervix, because I was 3 centimeters all day anyway. And I think because Henry was so low, it was literally his head. I could touch his head if I put my finger in my vagina. He was so low. And it was a multips os, but it was about 3 centimeters. And I think, and I wonder if the ProPes just happened to go inside the cervix, because as soon as she put it back up, because it slipped down, I labored straight away. But I hyperstimulated, and I was 5 to 6 in 10. I couldn't breathe. So I was like I couldn't catch my breath. And I thought, God, I coped so well at home. How am I not? So then I went into a negative brain loop. That stimulation of I'm failing, I'm not doing as well. Oh my God. Then I was on the CTG, and then I'm like, oh my God, this is horrendous. I just want to be free. And then because I was hyperstimulating, I think I had 3 VEs in a very short space of time. And I screamed Tess so loud that my colleague came running in with gas and air, and she said, I cannot believe that's Victoria. Because that's just not what I was about. Then the consultant had the wheelchair in the corridor, and she got me out of the bed and into the chair. This is ridiculous. She was going, get her downstairs, because I was screaming with the pain internally. I could still remember it. It was like somebody had a hot rod up my vagina into the middle of the core of my body and was twisting it. And when I got downstairs, I can remember thinking, please break my waters, because it'll all stop. You know that way where the natural hormone would have an argument with that hormone, and it would just then regulate. As soon as she broke my waters, I had that lull, and I was like, oh God, I can breathe. It was horrific. And I didn't mean to upset my colleagues when I talked about that, and I really upset a friend of mine, but she took that all about her, and she only did a couple of V's, and it was in labour. So I don't know why she got so upset about it. It's ridiculous, really. But actually, it was the overall experience, and it wasn't just the birth, it was the robbing of the home birth. And it was Tess, I think I weighed 70. I'm sure I only weighed 62 kilos when I got pregnant, and I weighed 72 when I had him. I was tiny. You could see my ribs. I was tiny. And they kept saying, you're going to have a huge baby. And he was tiny. My bump was tiny. He was 6'14". It was all lies. I was like, he's alive and he's small. I hate you. It was awful. It was really awful. I was so traumatized. And I think I do agree birth trauma is secondary from other things. But I think the birth trauma that you had was triggered right at that very first appointment. I think the robbing started then, and then there was just more robbing, and it just, by the time exposed, because everybody knew about my private life and everyone was talking about me, and I was admitted for 8 days, and then I was on a sliding scale. And I look back at my notes and read them. I had 73 hours of blood glucose monitoring every hour, and I think my blood sugars actually weren't that bad. They were never above 13, you think, and that was it was a short, sharp thing. It would only happen and then go away. And I thought, how awful to put me through something like that. How many women go through this? For myself, being a midwife, how much I struggled. Because a couple of my colleagues said, you really didn't look well. I wasn't well. I had the most horrendous headaches. Well, you would do. Yeah, you'd be sugared and fluid and all sorts of... Although you'd have a lot of fluid on board, you'd really be dehydrated as well, because of the way the body stores all of that sort of stuff. That's quite hard hearing, actually. But
one of the things that came to my mind was how, for you, how robbed you felt
Mm.
through that, like being your so far the last birth experience that you've had. But my feelings are sometimes that women feel grateful that they've ended up with this live baby, that
Mm.
their own experience is like right down low on the sort of the
Mm.
importance.
I didn't go into I'm alive. I went into my God, my baby's alive.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just really interesting that a lot of people will just accept that's okay. Yeah, that's what you do now. You hand over your power to everybody else and, what's your problem sort of thing. And it's interesting we still have those polarizations of thought in and around sort of birth and things like that, which causes an awful lot of conflict. As we know recently in the paper, there's been a lot of exposure over a really, really sensitive subject, which is maternal death. And I spoke to you about this, didn't I? Saying I'm finding it really difficult how people are kind of dissecting things that are coming up in the news. One thing that really pisses me off about the whole thing is that they're exposing the maternal deaths that are occurring at home, and yet they're not exposing maternal deaths that occur within a hospital setting where they've got all the medical expertise, knowledge, and equipment around them. That's my only bugbear over the whole thing. But it's such the polarization of where you have your baby is put in the balance when these really controversial subjects hit the headlines. If you were to become pregnant again, just out of curiosity, where would your views land now in terms of maternity care, receiving maternity care, birthing your baby, given the challenges that you may face with your pregnancy because of the diabetes and things? Just curious more than anything.
I think because I've done a lot of work on myself emotionally, I'm learning that my life purpose is in my heart. I know where I'm at, and if I have another child, I would only like to have one scan to identify where the placenta is. I wouldn't even necessarily want to know if there's a heartbeat. Now, a lot of people wouldn't understand that because they've not been on the journey I've been on and what I feel. But I think it's this whole control of you're not happy until you've got a Doppler on you saying your baby's alive or you've had a CTG and it's alive and well. That doesn't take away the anxiety when you then go home and you're left with your beautiful bump and your baby and you haven't got a CTG and a scanner, so then you don't think your baby's well. But you know your baby's well because your heart tells you your baby's well. I knew my baby died. I knew.
Said to me, I don't think this is going to end in a full term pregnancy. And I remember saying to you, the miscarriage I had between Honey and Rio, I felt like that. I just knew it wasn't going that way.
I didn't think the baby was dead yet. I felt energy there, but I didn't. I think I know that the baby died very suddenly, and then obviously, I gave birth to baby. And we don't say that, we say passing, but actually, I gave birth to my baby. It doesn't matter what gestation it is; it's my baby, our baby. And I think for me, I would continue with my care at home. I don't feel the need to listen in. Your baby talks to you through its movements. And if you connect into your baby, all my babies move differently. I can remember William being the most wriggly baby. He was well. James wasn't moving as much. And Henry was a much quieter baby again. They were all different. And fetal movements weren't a big thing when I was first pregnant with my first two. It really came in over the last sort of 12 or maybe 15 years. It was different. But so for me, I think I would have my baby in my own environment, connected to myself. And I know people won't understand this, but whatever the outcome for me and my baby is meant to be. But I'm good at knowing my exit strategy. So if I say enough's enough, I need help, I will go. A bit like when my appendix ruptured. I wasn't moving from this living room, Tess. I wasn't going to no hospital until my husband said I looked green and I needed to go. And I said, right, take me, let's go. But I had to be ready. So I have heard recently that a colleague had said, I'm really worried about Victoria not having care. I want her to know that I'm here if she needs me. And that was lovely. And I know that. I know that if I reached out to any colleague or yourself or anyone and said, could you just listen into my baby? They would do it. But just because I don't want their environment doesn't mean to say that I can't pick what care I choose. So I would have happily have managed my diabetes. I would have managed everything myself. I'm an expert in my own body. I'm at the stage where if my water's ruptured, if I go septic, I need help. But if I don't and my body recovers, because you ruptures membranes lots of times and they recover fine, and babies are normal and fine. So there's lots of things I'm learning about just trusting. So for me, I would have had our baby at home. I obviously think about the challenge of social services after that. I didn't have the blood sugars. Well, I can do that myself. I can do OBS myself, or I can bring someone in to do it. As long as you don't omit caring for your baby, then all these external forces of social care or the police will come. There's all just fear mongering. And I'm past all that. They don't have a right to cross my castle, my threshold, and they don't have a right to take my own biological son or daughter. So I'm learning a lot about the sovereignty and about, as you know, common law and well, I don't even like to say common law so much. It's just God's natural law. The law of our land is the law of our people. So for me, I feel quite strong in that situation. But like I say, I'm not someone that would be afraid to say I need to go to the hospital. But the difference is I would be going there prepared and wouldn't be giving over my control.
The thing that strikes me, as you know, and I think we've spoken about this a lot, is that I feel care provision now is do-gooding. And I've said that to you quite a bit, haven't I? It's like the reason it was set up was out of a need. I mean, for me, the biggest thing that impacted the health and well-being and the outcomes for mums and babies was the Water Act, the Housing Act. They say the introduction of antibiotics and blood transfusions, but if I'm honest with you, these two things had already happened and underway. These stepped in at the last minute and kind of took the glory. And then immunisations then came and took that. But that was to do in and around the infectious diseases and things like that. But these two things. So for me, it's your diet and lifestyle. You're living in a clean running water, and like the Housing Act in terms of you're not living a multiple occupants house. Because another thing about if you look at the epidemiology of diseases, especially things like chickenpox, measles, and all of those kind of what I'd call common diseases, the spread of those, the outbreaks of those quite often come when we're overpopulated. COVID explained that really simply. If you lived in a city, everybody got COVID. And a lot of people came down, as we know, came down to the coastal areas because they knew it was safer to be down here. There were less occupancy, less people, less chance of infection spreading. And care has overstepped that doing, above all, do no harm into do-gooding, where they're trying to enforce we're saving people's lives onto people that don't need it, and therefore they're doing more harm than good. Does that make sense? So if you're a woman like you, strong-minded, strong-willed, strong in her views and understanding of her own self, and knows her body well and knows how to manage her own diabetes, and you go along and you see the consultant, they say, I'm very aware of all of that, and thank you very much for your advice. I'll consider it. That's all you need to do is to consider it, and then do whatever you will with that information yourself.
I couldn't agree more, Tass. I've been saying to women that have been coming to me recently, I've got a consultant appointment, really nervous about it. I said, just listen to what they've got to say. Say, thank you for explaining to me my pregnancy and your policies and evidence. I need some time to think about it. That system is there for you to use. You pay your taxes for that. Tell them, thank you very much. And I'd like to come back in a couple of days to talk about it. They can't give you that appointment. That's not your problem.
No.
They cannot expect you to make 15-minute decisions on your whole life for the rest of your life. And that's what we need to start getting women to be educated on is, thanks for your time, doc. I know you haven't got time to see me again, but you're going to have to make time somewhere. We have to start changing that system to suit us. And we demand, no, you don't get to do that. But the problem you've got is a lot of people are traumatized and running out of energy. So they don't necessarily have that fight in them like we do, but it's just the small little things that will change their whole pregnancy. I've got people that want to have an elective section. I'm not against sections. I'm not against vaginal birth. I'm not against a VBAC in any way. If that's what I don't have an attachment. I've noticed this. I never had an attachment to what people want. I can remember a lady was prolonged rupture of membranes and she wanted to go in the pool. and they wouldn't let her. And I said, what's the big deal? Let her go in. I didn't go, oh, that was a silly move. I remember saying to my boss, and she was lovely, I just said, this lady really wants to go in the pool. How can we facilitate that? Because it never felt right for me not to facilitate what they wanted. And my boss said, we can't really do that because the policy says this. And I thought, well, let her decide. Let
It's
her have the
interesting
next
you it's
strategy.
interesting you keep still using the word policy because that's what you were raised with.
There are guidelines, but the majority of them might have been a policy or whatever. But yeah, so you think back to those things, you think, I wish I'd
Mm.
fulfilled more women's things, but I struggled with the trans part. I struggled with that really bad. It was the one thing I really did struggle with. I couldn't get my head around saying that these women who turned to men said that they were pregnant as men. I just couldn't get my head around it. And I can remember right towards the end, I thought, I can't do all this.
Whereas for me, I don't care. You call yourself whatever you like. Do you know what I mean? I don't care what you're embodied in, as long as you're embodied in something. But it's a bit like for me as well. I would say, if you want to swing from a chandelier, babes, I'm happy. I just want to know who put the chandelier up. That's all I need to know. Because, like, if it's your husband and he's not the best DIY person, could we maybe get it checked? But I can put cushions down. I can stand underneath you if you need me to. I can swing on the chandelier with you if you
You
want
want
me
to
to.
swim with the dolphins, in birth with the dolphins, that is your choice. That's where I'm at. But what
Yeah.
a lot of women do is they hand over control, they don't get what they want, and then they blame.
Mm,
But you gave over your whole control. That's why I now take full responsibility for my birth of Henry.
mm,
I chose that. I don't, Nikita talks about that a lot. I actually chose that birth. It doesn't matter that I didn't know differently. I chose it in that moment, and that was meant to be. Would I choose it again? Absolutely not. Would I take control of myself? Absolutely. But I think if you've then got an outcome which is absolutely horrendous, it's hard to then turn that back on itself. And that's why I know that my baby that I lost recently, that was their time. That's what they wanted, although it has been really difficult. It was what they wanted, and and I know I'm left with quite a residual energy there, which I can't quite tie off yet.
we talked about that residual energy before, and I think it's still tying a little bit into Henry's, that disempowerment that you felt there, about the lessons that you needed. You chose that journey for your own growth because what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. I think you've learned an awful lot about yourself as a woman, as a midwife, as a mother, and about your spiritual journey of learning. And that's something that for me has been a massive, I've carried my spiritual journey very silently in my own self. A lot of people say, well, you're really spiritual, but I just silently be. But for you, I feel it was like a huge awakening.
Mm.
And I'm fascinated to kind of like share how that came about for you.
I've always been spiritual and curious and tarot, and was obsessed by the moon. Well, there you go, the moon. I've always been really drawn to staring at the stars. I'm more of a winter girl than I am a summer girl. I love the water. I can't bear to be away from the water, but I won't get in the water. That's the difference. I've got a real fear of water. So if I was in a bad place, I wouldn't go towards the woods. I go towards the sea and the coast and the sea air. And I think when I did midwifery, I became the most dense I'd ever been. And and I know that at the time I didn't piece those things together. But when I started seeing those baby deaths and I started questioning the COVID narrative, and I was a bit like, none of these women have got COVID, but they've all got issues and have all been vaccinated, and I was one of, and I bet you my colleagues would remember this because not many of us did it. I would always write how many vaccines they had and if they remembered what they were. And on my handover at the door and label, what I would always say, she's been vaccinated twice. I don't know why, or she's had 3 vaccines. And I never met anybody that didn't have any. So although my brain didn't go to, oh my God, they tried to kill us with the COVID vaccines, or they tried to kill us with a fake COVID or whatever. My brain didn't go there because I wouldn't see the world that way. Because when you're spiritually connected, you see a lot of the good. You don't see that biblical dark. So I think for me, when I was there, I was absorbing and picking up these little stories and these little narratives, and then the union stuff. And I was like, something not right with the RCM. And I'm going to the GMB and they're not right either. And oh my God, they're all a little bit corrupt over here. And all the managers are all really secretive, but they're also really bitchy. And they're also really nasty. And they're also like, I suppose I was like, a whiplash going on. And then when I left, well, before I left, I'll rewind. I went to Lupton, as you know, and I started there. And that was really beautiful because I really purged
How did you get drawn to Lipton?
calling.
Ah, right,
I
okay.
really purged a lot up.
Yeah.
I'm very sensitive, so I even put some rosemary CBD oil on my hair this week that I from the Botana company because my hair's been thinning. Look, it's like really thin, and I put this on my hair, and I was high in the night. I woke up like, oh my God, like what is in that stuff? I'm so sensitive. Like, I'm sensitive to touch. I'm sensitive to stimulation. I'm sensitive to the cold. I'm sensitive to the heat. I'm sensitive around energy. And so when I went to Lupton, I really purged. I vomited a lot up. I can remember being sat in this very seat in January of 2021, and I looked out that window and I felt like 7 months passed because I was in such a bad place. I didn't even want to be here. I was like, what is life all about? So coming along that sort of spiritual journey wasn't until after I left, and then I started talking out, and then I started piecing some things. It was like it's like my brain just went, it opened like that, and then it just went boom. And then it was almost like downloads of like codes and information that my brain was like, oh my God, what is happening? And then when I started to speaking to like David Cartland, and I would speak to other people, and then John O'Loon, I was able to piece the whole puzzle together. And I would call it like you build a house and you have cement in between the bricks. I had the bricks and those other people brought the cement in the middle. That's the way I would describe it. Janet asked us a question and she said, who is God? And I really, really thought about that at that time. And I thought, I have no idea. I've never been asked that question before. And that was in 2023. 22. And I went away and I really rethought about it. And she told me to buy this book. And it's been sat here because I go through it now and again. Conversations with God by Neil Walsh. And I started reading this book. And then I realized that when I dream at night, whenever I wake up in the morning, that's when I'm on fire. That's when I get my information. And I could literally sit there for hours and write journal and journal and journal. But by like 3 o'clock, you ain't getting nothing out of me. I'm dense. And I'll be like, right, I'll go for a run, or not that I ran in ages, but I think of it and I don't do it. Or I'll go to Tesco. But see, you won't get a lot out of me in the morning because I'm very connected somewhere else. But what I've realized is that the Bible is real and it is a story. And there's some really beautiful verses and verbs and lots of these amazing words and synchronicities, and that's the journey I've been on. Is it's all woven in. And what better way to attack mums and babies is to attack the village. It attacks everything that we are and what we should be. So I think for me, learning midwifery has connected me to my God, my source, and I'm much more trusting and I'm much more knowing and I have a faith. And just because I don't go to a cross in a church doesn't mean I don't have my own faith or my own religion, however they want to call that word. Religion is probably the word that they've inverted in lots of ways. But so I'm learning a lot about that now and understanding that there is more to us than just this physical being. And having that sense of knowing allows you never to give over yourself or give yourself away to anybody ever again until you feel ready that that's what you want to give over, because you have to give over your love to your husband or your partner. You don't have to, but it's beautiful when you do, and you can. But I would never do that again in healthcare, and I would never do that again in groups or anything like that. I'm a lot more preserved in myself. But so the journey for me has been hugely profound. And when I got called I got called the baby killer, I was destroyed. You know how bad that was for me. It was horrific. And you were the person that said to me, unless you start facing what is behind this, you'll never recover from this. And you have to face it. And I faced it. And I thank you for that.
Do you know what it was, though? It's about, you mentioned it, it's about the knowing.
Yeah.
And I have a real thing, as you know, about the difference between knowing and knowledge.
Yeah.
And when you hit your knowing and it's in here and it's your belief and it's you, it's your own God, your universe, or whatever, everything flows.
Yeah.
You connect into your source and everything flows. You can gather knowledge, which may enhance the connection or help you get to that connection a little bit sooner, or take you on pathways that will enlighten your knowing a bit quicker. But I knew, I had a knowing that the injustice that was being served to you was so huge that you had to connect to your knowing to know that that was a complete injustice, and that's what you had to go through, this journey for you to flourish and grow. You have seen me grow. I have seen you grow, and we have just mirrored and reflected each other in many ways along on our journeys, which has been absolutely incredible. We've had some massive highs and some really broken lows.
And never at the same time.
No.
We've
That's
always been, it's literally like, you're there, I'm here, I do that, and then I
Yeah.
go there, and then you do that, and we know when the other person needs a phone call.
Yeah. And that's that knowing.
It's the
And
knowing.
it's about catching, and it's about holding that safe space.
Do you know what else I know? All of those fuckers out there watch us and hate the fact that we haven't failed.
Well, they wish we had, and their assessment of failing would be, like, I think many would take a great element of satisfaction that we no longer are midwives, that we're retired midwives. In their heads, they think they've won and that we have failed. Well, I say, I don't think so. I'm going to let you know now that actually it was my great success stepping back into my power, letting go of an authority that thought it had control on me. I can remember my first day of my training. The first thing they said to me, even back then in 1996 or 7, was, your pin is going to be the most important thing about. And actually, it's that they've dangled and beaten.
They feed that into your veins.
Yeah. And it becomes,
they say to me in my year, you'll never go your whole career without being up against the NMC at least once. I mean, what the hell is that all about? That's what they told us.
do you know what they said to me? Maternal deaths are really rare. It's unlikely that you will ever experience one. Okay, well, I've known of 3 maternal deaths in the last 8 years of my career. I've known of. I wasn't involved in all of the maternal deaths. What I'm saying is that I've known of them, and they said I would never know of any. You know, when I started my career, the cesarean section rate was at 7%. It's over 50% now. I wasn't going into a career thinking women weren't able to give birth. I stepped into my career fully knowing when I had my first daughter, for somebody to have a cesarean section, it was a life-threatening event. And your most important aspect and question was asking them, oh my God, are they okay? Have they survived? Is everything all right? It's not like that now. It's like, oh, I had a section. You know, it's like, well, do you want peanut butter on your toast or would you prefer chocolate spread?
One of my biggest fears was ever having a cesarean section. That's interesting. That is interesting. I was like, there's no way on this earth you are ever putting a scalpel on my body. It wasn't happening. My
And that
biggest
you
fear.
had that with Henry, didn't you? Did you have a cesarean?
No, I
with
had a
Henry?
vagina.
No, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why I always thought he came as a cesarean.
No, I wouldn't have it. I was like, I will push him out. I do not care. But the other thing I noticed was, because when I had James and I was at home, my body knew when to push. I knew I was going to push. I knew my body was about to do it. It's an innate instinct. When I had Henry, they were telling me to push because the CTG wasn't great. But I remember sitting there with my leg up going, but I'm not ready to push. And they're going, you need to push. And I'm going, but I'm not ready to push. My body's not told me I want to push yet. When it's ready. So I was like, I remember being sat there like, it would just felt so stressful. My leg was up like this. And I was like, and I can remember I was butt naked because I get so hot in labor and I like to be naked in labor because I like nothing on my skin. I don't even like the water when I'm in labor. I like to be on land and I like to be able to walk around with the fan on. And I was like this. And they were like, you need to push. And then my boss went and got some scissors, and I thought, I've not had an episiotomy since my first birth. That's not happening. That's not happening. I was like, what is happening? You know, I had an intact perineum 2 times before that. I was thinking, what is going on? And she was like, you need to push. And I can remember saying, I'm not ready to push. And then I started pushing, but I wasn't ready. And I've done that to far too many women. Far too many women. When your baby is ready, it will naturally push. Your body will naturally do it. I've done it. And I just forgot everything in this birth. Everything. And I think that's why I felt, oh, I can maybe put this right now by having another baby. But actually that's the wrong thing to do. I need to just deal with what did happen and meet it with love and meet it with peace and say, well, I meet you, old friend, and thanks for the experience.
And do you know the thing about all of that is that you didn't do anything wrong. One of the things that comes into the birthing arena is how women feel like they've done things wrong. There is no right or wrong way of giving birth. There's giving birth. And there are experiences on that journey to that birth giving moment. And some of them might not be that pleasant, but that doesn't mean you to say you've done anything wrong. That means that on that journey that you experienced, you were given things to think about, reflect upon, and grow upon. And like you say, you have to meet it with love and go, I welcome that experience because it made me grow. It enlightened me to recognize so much more about myself, the world, and the universe.
I thank midwifery now for the journey. I thank all of it. Every bit that's happened in the last year, I'm almost like, thank you for coming. Thank you for giving me the journey, even when it's very, very difficult and I have my dark days. On the dark days, I'm like, I hate you all. Go away, shut the door, don't want to speak to you. And they're not nice. But on the other days, there's a balance of the yin and the yang. And I say, thank you for coming because I've learned X, Y, and Z. But, you know, not everybody can do that.
Well, most people take variant times to get to that place. I think for you, you have certainly had an accelerative button of growth. I think I've said this to you before, like on my pathway, and my journey, I look now at a cycle, it's been like a cycle. And what took me 5 years to learn then has taken me 12 months to learn this time because I'm learning it a second time around. I look at you and I just feel like it was like, we're going to pull your eyeballs to the back of your head.
And I was just like, what the hell?
What?
What, you're only given what you can cope with, right?
Yeah, and well done you for coping with all of that with amazing magnificence. So just kind of bringing things towards a bit of an end, what would you say was the lowest point within your career as a midwife and your highest point? And then the same with being a mum and a woman.
I would say the lowest point in my career was walking into work and not wanting to be there, which I'd never felt before. And I remember
Wow.
walking into labour ward and thinking, I don't like this place. I don't like how it feels. I don't like what it represents. And I've spent 10 years fighting through because I wasn't the most sharpest student. I didn't get a first, I got a second. Got a first in practice, but I got a second in theory because I didn't care about bloody theory and I didn't bloody care about appendix, so I always got less points because I used to put it through a cheat school thing. So I was a bit like, you know, that sadness of this is the worst bit I could be in, because it's a bit like when you're married and then you know it's going to end but you don't want it to, but you can't fight it. And I think that was the lowest bit because I always thought the good and the bad days I would always be all right, but I knew it was over. And I think that was probably around about 2020, mid 23. I just knew I'd done it, run its course, and I was sad. I was low. I felt really, I just didn't want to be there anymore. My highest point, I'll be honest with you, is everything I've done since. I am so proud of myself for overcoming every threat from even friends, like, you need to be careful, you need to watch your back, never sitting into that fear and having the knowing that what I was doing was the right thing and that what I was doing was never from a place of malice and anger. It was genuinely about protecting my colleagues and protecting women and babies. That was it, that injustice. So for me, the high part is that I've done 22 2 months now, with a gap in the middle where I didn't do anything, of campaigning. And I look sometimes and I go, oh my God, that's me on a podcast. That's so weird. And I'm like, oh my God, and I'm so proud of myself, Tess, because, not many people could sleep at night with worry with all the comments. I don't care. I don't read them. People think I read their shit. Do I? Hell, I never read them. If I do, it's rare and I start liking them because I think people like the interaction. I do. I am comfortable with you hating and despising me. That's my high, because you mean nothing to me. I don't know you. You think you know me, and I love the fact that I give you no airtime and you give me all of your energy, and it's absolutely worthless. Keep it. Go and do something constructive with your life. So for me, that's my high, and I'm really proud of the fact that my grandchildren one day, this is what, like, even sat here with you, I think our grandchildren one day are going to go, look at Granny, look at great Granny. Like, I would love to be able to see a video of my grandma and her mother. Like, and I'm really proud that my grandchildren will be like, that's my granny. Like, hi,
Yeah.
grandkids. So for me, it's holding on to that real village generational growth. So that's my
Amazing.
high. So my low as a mother, I would say that during my divorce, I was a really shit mother. I was neglective of my children's needs, not in terms of feeding or clothing. I was just a bit vacant, and I threw everything into my midwifery, and I don't really remember the 5 years of their lives, and I wasn't the best mother, and I've admitted that to my boys, and I've like the other day we were sat here and I said, "What's one thing you don't like about me?" Because I'm at the place where I'm okay hearing what they're unhappy about with their mum.
Yeah.
I think it creates a really safe space, as a safe boundary of each other. Of course, they said they hated me shouting. So that bit for me has been really. I've journaled a lot about that this last couple of years. That I really recognise that mother that was like, the dishes aren't done, and the painting hasn't been done, but actually they were just young boys. And I think, what was I? They weren't the men that the husband left, and I made them the men. They were children. That's probably, I cry about that sometimes even now and go, oh God, Vic, I could cringe. But then I tell you what, how I feel now as a mother, they have a really good mum.
Mm,
I look at my boys and everyone knows they're my world.
yeah.
They are my everything, but healthily.
Mm,
I look at them and I'm like, you're so beautiful.
mm.
Like, you are so beautiful and you are such good men and you are such good souls. And I've done a great job of raising those boys. And I'm really proud of myself. Yeah.
That's so it's so lovely to hear. And do you know what? I love that raw honesty, that you can be really honest about aspects of being a mum, that you can say, I wasn't the best mum, because I think that's a guilt thing that we carry around as mums, to actually acknowledge and own. There were times when I haven't been a great mum. It makes you feel like you've failed, or you're not good enough, and all of those things. But actually, by owning it, it really enables you to step into the power and say, but actually, I'm also a really fucking good mum.
I'm such a great mum. Like, someone wrote something, and Andrew and I the other day were at the football watching James, and he said to me, oh, did you see that comment that man wrote? And I said, Andy, I don't read any comments. I don't engage in these people. I block everybody that compromises my happiness. And he said, oh, this guy said nobody would get you pregnant anyway. And he actually jumped on it and said, well, actually, I'm just going to let you know I've had 2 beautiful boys with this amazing woman. And the guy, and he said, I'm really sorry you feel this way. And actually, you really need to start looking at waking up and not attacking people like this. It was lovely. But, there are times when he and I haven't been great parents to the boys at times because of our own issues. But I'd like to say now I'm grounded enough that if you wanted to knock on my door and sit and say, you've done this, 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 and this, and I don't like you, I'd go, God, I'm really sorry I made you feel that way, but I'm really glad we can talk about it. That's where I'm at with it. So my husband and I have adopted this really beautiful behavior of we could actually sit down and talk about anything. We couldn't talk about anything without being triggered 10 years ago. Now we can have the most deepest, difficult conversations about things you don't want to go on there on. And it ends with, I love you. And you know that, we've grown. So it's yeah, I feel really proud of the woman I've become.
Yeah.
Really, really proud. Not proud of the things I've done sometimes, but I'm really proud of who I've become.
Can see this is look, can you see this? This is us. There were some little girls who had little girls right in the middle of their forehead. And when they were good, they were very, very good. And
And
when they were
when they
bad,
were
they
bad,
were
they were
horrid.
so bad. Oh, thanks, Tess. It's been so lush.
Do you know what, Vicky? It's been amazing. As always, I love the way our conversations just flow and they're authentic and they're real. And thank you so much for sort of sharing so openly and beautifully and sharing this journey. I'm really excited about, this adventure with podcasts. And I really appreciate you coming on and for all the support that you've given me along on my journey of coming into that big scary world of the internet.
You just got to keep, never mind the numbers. Don't mind this. Thank your followers. That's all I do. And I just keep it authentic. And I've had amazing support this year. And loads of people have been incredible. And the small portion I just ignore.
And I think that'd be lessons that I'll be taking from you and learning because,
Ditto.
well, that's us all through and through, isn't it? I'll end this now. Yeah, thanks. I can't thank you enough from the bottom of my heart.
You're so
So,
welcome.
and speak to you soon.
Bye, my darling.